wild expression on her face. "Get out!" she screamed. "Get out of my house! I won't have it! You catch that train and get out of town, do you hear?" "But Aunt Matilda," I protested. In the end, I had to get out or she would have had a stroke. She was shaking like a leaf, her skin mottled, her eyes wild, as I went down the front steps with my bag. "You get that train, do you hear?" was the last thing she screamed at me as I hurried toward Main Street. However, I had no intention of leaving town with Aunt Matilda upset that way. I'd let her have time to cool off and then come back. Meanwhile, I'd try to get to the bottom of things. A thing as big as wall TV in full color and stereophonic sound must be the talk of the town. I'd find out where they had their office and go talk to them. A career with something like that would be the best thing I could ever hope to find, and getting in on the ground floor. It surprised me that Aunt Matilda could be so insanely greedy. I shook my head in wonder. It didn't figure. I had breakfast at the hotel cafe and made a point of telling the waitress, who knew me, that it was my second breakfast and that I had intended to catch the morning train back to Chicago, but maybe I wouldn't. After I finished eating, I asked if it would be okay to leave my suitcase behind the counter while I looked around a bit. She showed me where to put it, so it would be out of the way. When I paid for my breakfast, I half turned away and then turned back casually. "Oh, by the way," I said, "where's this wall TV place?" "This what?" she said. "You know," I said, "colored TV like a picture you hang on the wall." All the color faded from her face. Her eyes went past me, staring. I turned in the direction she was staring, and on the wall above the plate glass front of the cafe was a picture. That is, there was a picture frame and a pair of dark glasses that took up most of the picture, with the lower part of a forehead and the upper part of a nose. I had noticed it once while I was eating and had assumed it was a display ad for sunglasses. Now I looked at it more closely, but could not detect movement in it. It still looked like an ad for sunglasses. "I don't know what you're talking about," I heard the waitress say, her voice edged with fear. "Huh?" I said, turning my head back to look at her. Oh well, never mind. I left the cafe with every outward appearance of casual innocence, but inside I was beginning to realize for the first time the possibilities and the danger that could lie in the use of this new TV development. That had been a Big Brother is watching you setup back there in the cafe, except that it had been a girl instead of a man, judging from the style of the sunglasses and the smoothness of the nose and the forehead. I had wondered about the broadcasting end of things. Now I knew. That had been the TV eye, and somewhere there was a framed picture hanging on the wall, bringing in everything that took place in the cafe, including everything that was said, everything I had said too. It was an ominous feeling. Aunt Matilda almost had a stroke trying to get me out of town. Now I knew why. She was caught in this thing and wanted to save me. 4 days ago, she had probably not fully realized the potentiality for evil of the invention, but by the time I showed up, she knew it. Well, she was right. This was not something for me to tackle. I would keep up my appearance of not suspecting anything and catch that train Aunt Matilda wanted me to catch. From way out in the country came the whistle of the approaching milk run, the train that would take me back to Chicago. In Chicago, I would go to the FBI and I would tell them the whole thing. They wouldn't believe me, of course, but they would investigate. If the thing hadn't spread any further than Sumac, it would be a simple matter to stop it. I'd hurry back to the cafe and get my suitcase and tell the waitress I'd decided to catch the train after all. I turned around. Only I didn't turn around. That's as nearly as I could describe it. I did turn around, I know I did. But the town turned around with me, and the sun and the clouds and the countryside. So maybe I only thought I turned around. When I tried to stop walking, it was different. I simply could not stop walking. Nothing was in control of my mind. It was more like stepping on the brakes and the brakes not responding. I gave up trying, more curious about what was happening than alarmed. I walked 2 blocks along Main Street. Ahead of me, I saw a sign. It was the only new sign I had seen in Sumac. In ornate neon script, it said, "Portraits by Lana." I don't know whether my feet took me inside independently of my mind or not, because I was sure that this was the place and I wanted to go anyway. Not much had been done to modernize the interior of the shop. I remembered the last time I had been here, it had been a stamp collector headquarters run by Mr. Mason and his wife. The counter was still there, but instead of stamp displays, it held a variety of standard portraits such as you can see in any portrait studio. None of the TV portraits were on display here. The same bell that used to tinkle when I came into the stamp store tinkled in back of the partition when I came in. A moment later, the curtain in the doorway of the partition parted and a girl came out. How can I describe her? In appearance, she was any one of 1,000 smartly dressed brunettes that wait on you in quality photograph studios. And yet she wasn't. She was as much above that in cut as in the average smartly dressed girl is above a female alcoholic after a 10-day drunk. She was perfect. Too perfect. She was the type of girl a man would dream of meeting someday, but if he ever did, he would run like hell because he never hoped to live up to any such perfection. "You have come to have your portrait taken?" she asked. "I am Lana." "I thought you already had my portrait," I said. "Didn't you get it from that eye in the hotel cafe?" "It's not the same thing," Lana said. "Through an eye, you remain a variable in the Mantram complex. It takes the camera to fix you, so that you are an iconic invariant in the Mantram." She smiled and half turned toward the curtain she had come through. "Would you step this way, please?" she invited. "How much will it cost?" I said, not moving. "Nothing, of course," she said. "Terrestrial money is of no use to me, since you have nothing I would care to buy. And don't be alarmed, no harm will come to you or anyone else." A fleeting expression of concern came over her face. I realized that many of the people of Sumac are quite alarmed, but that is to be expected of people uneducated enough to still be superstitious. I went past her through the curtain. Behind the partition, I expected to see out-of-this-world scientific equipment stacked to the ceiling. Instead, there was only a portrait camera on a tripod. It had a long bellows and would take a plate the same size as that picture of the church I had seen. "You see," Lana said, "it's just a camera." She smiled disarmingly. I went toward it casually, and suddenly I stopped as though another mind controlled my actions. When I gave up the idea I had had of smashing the camera, the control vanished. There was no lens in the lens frame. "Where's the lens?" I said. "It doesn't use a glass lens," Lana said. "When I take the picture, a lens forms just long enough to focus the elements of your body into a Mantram fix." She touched my shoulder. "Would you sit down over there, please?" "What do you mean, a Mantram fix?" I asked her. She paused by the camera and smiled at me. "I use your language," she said. "In some of your legends you have the notion of a Mantram, or what you consider magical spell. In one aspect, the notion is of magical words that can manipulate natural forces directly. The notion of a devil doll is a little closer. Only instead of actual substance from the subject, hair, fingernail, and so on, the Mantram matrix takes the detailed force pattern of the subject through the lens when it forms. So in your concepts, what results is an iconic Mantram, but it operates both ways. You'll see what I mean by that." With another placating smile, she stepped behind the camera, and without warning, light seemed to explode from the very air around me, without any source. For a brief second, I seemed to see not a glittering lens, but a black, bottomless hole form in the metal circle at the front of the camera. And an experience I am familiar with now, it seemed to rush into the bottomless darkness of that hole and back again, at the rate of thousands of times a second. arriving at some formless destination, and each